Well, it's time now for an analyst roundup. Joining us now is Lisa Thomas, Cowen Managing Director and Associate Director of Research, Jason Wilson, Budding Equity Asset Management President and Partner of ETF MG Alternative Harvest ETF, and Rob Wertheimer, Melius Research Founding Partner. All right, everyone, so I want to start a little bit just broad-based. Let's get the elephant out of the room. Maybe, Rob, let's start with you. Is it legal as an American investor to invest in cannabis stocks?
I'm not sure that's an easy answer, as easy an answer as you think. But yeah, so the stocks are traded publicly in Canada. And so there's a little bit of complexity where especially some institutional investors find it difficult to plunge in. So there's lots of different compliance departments taking lots of different views on really what you can do.
Right. And you have a negative rating on the industry overall. So what would it take for you to change your mind on that?
It could be a week. So it's a dynamic and volatile industry, right? So the potential is obviously very, very large. And that's exciting. And then, the steps to unlock that potential can come legally, can come with legalization, can come with market access, can come with production, et cetera. So we had only put the negative rating on a few weeks ago. And that was just as we saw in this massively growing industry, supply has the potential to sort of outstrip demand for a little while when we have a bottleneck in distribution. So that's kind of the idea. The potential is there, and then it's volatile, and you try and pick your spots.
Well, just looking at today, we saw Kronos shares really soaring on that double upgrade from Bank of America, Merrill Lynch. So what do you think is the next catalyst for the industry? Is it just sort of these ratings? Is it federal legalization? Is it different, just legislation that we see going through? Is it M&A? Lisa, maybe let's start with you for this one.
Sure. Well, I think there are a lot of things lying ahead. I mean, I think in the near term in Canada, because we're always watching the Canadian markets for signs, they're a bellwether there. I think in particular, the rollout of novel form factors that's expected in October is likely a catalyst for the industry and the stocks, because I think you're going to see more and more premiumization, sale of products with higher margin profile. And so I think those trends are going to be important to watch. And then, as you discussed on one of the earlier segments around SAFE Act and some of that legislation, I think those are extremely important and really carry the potential as catalysts as well. You've also got veterans related legislation on the table. So I think with each of those advances, depending on broader market conditions, because the space is not immune to that either, I think you will see some movement.
Jason, it's kind of funny we're talking about catalysts here too, because when you look at some of the major players in this space, they're up about 50% year to date. So, I mean, I'm not sure if a lot of industries would be talking about catalysts when they've seen that kind of growth, but nonetheless, I mean, people have been expecting this when we talk about cannabis. What are your thoughts on the way the stock performance has been to start 2019, just kind of based on what we've seen in the news cycle and kind of how it relates to what you've seen maybe a year, 2 years ago?
Yeah, from an ETF perspective, it's been an incredible year. We started with a few hundred million in assets. We're over 1.2 billion in assets, and that's in line with the price performance we've seen in the market. So this has been an incredible support for the product, a lot of demand, and it's pretty amazing. Like even when we had at the end of last year a big drawdown of stock, we had no redemptions in the fund. So to see this continued movement of money into the fund, into the industry, and it looks like there's a lot, it's early innings, lots of room to run.
When you guys talk to people who are investing in this space, there are a lot of connections and kind of similes and metaphors made about the crypto space, kind of the risk potential you have there when we're talking about a highly regulated, as you said, no one ever knows what's going to happen here. But when we look at those similarities, when you guys look at the investors, do you see kind of the same types of people interested in the space, jumping into the space? Tech, crypto, cannabis are often talked about similarly.
So there's one difference. So with cannabis, there's a market. So crypto has a ton of potential. It could transform a lot of things in financial transactions. With cannabis, there is a real market there. You just have to convert it to legal, right? And so there's a much stronger foundation. And then the consumer branding potential is very, very large. So I think it fits very naturally in a consumer staples space, and so people understand that.
Well, we asked this question of all the CEOs earlier in this show, but I want to ask you guys too, as people watching the industry very closely, what do you think is the biggest threat to the cannabis industry overall today?
It's got to be regulation. I mean, at the end of the day, the biggest challenge is going to be getting not just regulation in the U.S., but globally. I mean, there's over 40 different countries right now that have legalized or are legalizing, but we still have international treaties because of the status in the U.S. that's preventing global growth. So it's going to be really, that's one of the larger hurdles, but there's no question for the demand. I mean, there's billions of people that are in countries that are already legal, at least medicinally. And it's just how quickly it happens will depend on how quickly those regulations move along.
I brought the crypto thing up just because the regulation aspect is very similar, where people were cheering at some point, actually wanting regulation, because then there were guidelines that these companies can produce and look towards. I mean, could there be an argument made that regulation might also be a positive?
Oh, absolutely, and I think you saw that at last week's FDA hearing on CBD. And in fact, it's interesting because I think the analogy for cannabis is much more aptly made with biotech than with tech or crypto. And so I think you heard from 23 manufacturers of CBD products last week, open comment period until July. And what you hear consistently is people want to have standards and norms around product purity, quality, dosing, safety, all of those things. And so, the mantra, if the mantra before with cannabis was legalize it, perhaps now it's regulate it.
All right, fantastic. Thank you guys all for joining us.